Thank you, Laura and Eno and Rima, for bringing us that focus. Apparently, Laura and I were, I don't know if you want to call us in sync or in lockstep or whatever, but I'm basically going to say all the same things that Laura just said, but from a slightly different perspective. So I hope you're ready for part two of this extended focus. This week was a doozy of a week. I tried to find an image of something that said one thing after another, because that's really what it was in our house. Many of you know, a couple of us tested positive for COVID with mixed symptoms, and that was just how we started the week. It was just a roller coaster ride the whole way. But in the midst of all of this, in the midst of feeling overwhelmed and not knowing who of us was going to get sick and how long this was going to last and what it was going to do to work and school and all this other stuff, I realized that in spite of all of the things that were going what we would consider wrong, we're very lucky. You could call us blessed. And I realized that there are many things that I was grateful for in the midst of what was maybe definitely the most difficult week of 2022. How about that? But the most difficult week in a while. I found myself very thankful and grateful in the midst of the difficulty for all the ways that we had been blessed, how lucky that we were. And so I thought we'd just take a moment, kind of as Laura has already done, just to talk about some things, regardless of the week you've had. What are some things that you're grateful for this week? We do have a lot to be grateful for. Thank you all for sharing. You could probably make a long list of things, big and small, of people and puppies, and those of you with cats, I'm sure cats. Things in nature, sunrises, so many things for which we can be thankful and grateful and feel lucky. At the same time, there are many things, as Laura was saying, there are many difficult things in our world, both things that affect our entire planet, everyone on the planet, things that affect our nation, our city, just our little families, and all in between. There's a lot of difficult things going on as well. And this week, it struck me that in the midst of good times and bad, one that follows the other, one of the most loving things that we can do, one of the most loving things that we can choose, is to accept what is, to accept the things that are going on, be they things we consider good or bad, difficult things or easy things. And so what I wanted to reflect on, kind of as Laura already has, is one of the ways that we can practice love every day is by accepting. I'm surprised I haven't talked about this already, because it's been a recurring theme in my life in the last several years, but I haven't. I checked. In the last couple of years, I have not talked about this. So here we go. One of the things that accepting what's going on does is it brings peace. As I said, this was a particularly difficult week for our family, for a number of reasons, trying to keep each other safe and medical concerns. And while I was feeling confident that we would get through this, that there would be another side, it was still a difficult week and a lot of uncertainty about the immediate future and long-term future and what this would mean for our extended family and all kinds of things. In Romans chapter 8, verses 26 through 31, Paul here is talking about how the Holy Spirit is with us. And he says, likewise, the Spirit helps us in our weakness, for we do not know what we ought to pray for. And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good. What then shall we say to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? Even when we don't have the words to pray to God, even the right things to ask for or understanding of the situation, in spite of our inability to address what's going on in our lives, God is with us and God is for us. And some of my friends and family identify as people who often get caught up in their heads. And it's very easy to be overwhelmed when there's uncertainty. Our minds kind of run away with themselves, thinking of all the potential bad things that could result of whatever's going on. And in accepting, just accepting that this is what's happening, there's often some peace that comes because God is for us, and God is with us no matter what's going on. One of the things in the midst of the last couple of years that's been helpful for me personally is a mantra that I sometimes say to my family after a particularly difficult day. We'll worry about this tomorrow. And I thought that this was maybe an original thought that I had that I was bringing into the world, but then I realized, no, this is totally Jesus. Jesus in Matthew chapter 6, verse 34 says, "So do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will care for itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own." And when we're feeling overwhelmed in our house, when all of the difficulties seem to pile up and we don't know what's about to happen, sometimes we just say, okay, that's enough for today. We'll pick up worrying about this tomorrow. And on the other side of a sunrise, oftentimes things look a little better and a little easier than we thought they were to begin with. Accepting what is brings peace in uncertainty and allows us to keep loving, even in the midst of overwhelming difficulty. Accepting also changes your heart. For many of us, when we were growing up, either from parents or friends or from our own little brains, we got it in our head that if somebody is mean to us, then if somebody hits us, we need to hit them back because we need to stand up for ourselves. And I don't think that standing up for ourselves is a bad thing. There's certainly a place in our development for our own safety and security. At the same time, many of us carry that idea into adulthood, and we have within our hearts and our minds a permanent defensiveness that if somebody is doing something that we perceive as negative to ourselves, then we need to stand up for ourselves and physically or emotionally or mentally hit them back. And Jesus addresses this idea in Matthew chapter 5, verses 38 and 39. He says, "You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth," meaning if somebody does something injurious to you, you do that thing back to them. Not more, which was originally what the law was for. You can't do worse to them, but you can do up to and including what was done to you. "But I say to you," says Jesus, "do not resist the one who is evil. But if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also." And I think this is maybe the most difficult teaching of Jesus for us as Western Americans, because we are very much about our own security, about defending our rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And then we have this person that we admire, Jesus, who we want to be like. And he says these crazy things like, don't resist someone who's evil. And that raises so many questions about how do we do this collectively, but maybe one step at a time. How do I do this when people are unkind to me or mean to me? And I think in exploring that idea, what comes to mind is when someone is hurtful to me, instead of thinking about how I can defend myself or hurt them back, to sit with them, to sit with their fear and pain and be with them in the midst of whatever they're going through as well. One of the ways I've tried to live this out is adopt a stance of understanding the difficulty that they are going through, instead of a stance where I'm trying to keep myself safe or get them back or whatever it may be, to recognize that in all of our lives are sometimes overwhelming difficulties. Sometimes we look like we're strong, but maybe we're just hanging on by a thread. And if we can adopt this stance of, instead of defense, of being open to understanding the other person, it allows our heart to remain open and allows us to love other people when they also are going through difficult times. Accepting changes your heart from defending to loving. Maybe the most difficult thing we'll ever do. Love also surrenders control. Speaking of Western Americans, we are very much about the American dream, about our own security, about pursuing the life that we want to live and doing that unashamedly, chasing our dreams. And we live in a place where we have the freedom to do that, and we're very lucky for that. And so the idea of surrender is particularly difficult for me and maybe for you as well. And then I reflect on parts of the Bible like Psalm 23. This is selections from verses 1 to 4. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Laura read a verse that talked about the valley of weeping, I think it was, very similar to the valley of the shadow of death. But this image of being guided by a shepherd is often foreign to people like me and maybe to people like you. I like to think that I create my own destiny, that I take the steps that I want to, that I am free to do that. And the image of, one of the images of God in the Bible is that of a shepherd who, I think we can all agree, are probably smart. The shepherd is probably smarter than the sheep and maybe has a little bit broader view of what's going on than the sheep do. Not that sheep are dumb, they're smart in their own way. But the shepherd specifically understands the situation that the sheep are going through. The particular place might not be their resting place. It might be just something that you're traveling through to get to another place. Knows how to keep the sheep safe, can spot dangers before the sheep can. And that's the image we have of God in the Bible. And it's difficult for me to think of myself as a sheep, but I very much do, in difficult times, need a shepherd on whom I can put my trust. One of the ways that we can practice this is to see each and every situation, be they the good ones or the difficult ones, as the shepherd leading us. Again, we don't have the far-ranging sight of the shepherd. We don't know all of the terrain. But I think if we stick together and keep our eyes on the shepherd, then we can trust that the shepherd will lead us even through difficult situations. Love surrenders control that, frankly, we never really had to begin with. It allows us to accept. So these are 3 ways that I think accepting what's going on in the world leads us to become better lovers of those around us. That eventually there comes a point where we can worry about whatever's going on tomorrow. We can adopt a stance of understanding the difficulties that we're all going through, even those other people. And we can see each situation as the shepherd leading. I ran across a parable online that talked about life as a river, and some people resist the river, trying to pursue God by swimming upstream, and very much want to resist whatever's going on. And it's admirable that they want to pursue God in this way. Some people eventually get tired of being in the river, of the lack of control, and swim over to the bank and just kind of cling for dear life to whatever branches or rocks that they can. And this parable was talking about seeing the river not in opposition of God's will or leading, but as the very flow of God's heart, taking us to places that we can't quite see around the next bend. But as much as we can, accepting God's leading, maybe joining with other people and creating a little party raft, floating down the river together. That is a way that we can move with the heart and will of God, rather than resisting everything that's going on, learning to accept it. And in the midst of that, learning to and practicing love with the people around us. So may we take life one day at a time. May we recognize everyone is struggling, and may we respond appropriately. May we trust the shepherd's vision and leading, and through accepting what is, may we love every day.